The Where Our Minds Wander podcast may contain sensitive content and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Greetings, fellow wanderers, to the places our minds wander.
The house at the end of the dirt road, where disembodied voices whisper and strange sounds make the living shiver.
Where shadows lurk at the edge of the woods, just outside your back door. And mysterious lights speed beyond reason across the clear night sky.
Odd events throughout time that lead you down the rabbit hole.
I'm Wes.
And I'm Beth.
And this is Where Our Minds Wander. Hello and welcome to Where Our Minds Wander, all you fellow wanderers. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, everybody, and Happy New Year.
Yeah, we hope your new year is getting off to a good start.
We hope so, yeah. I can't believe it's 2025 already.
I know.
You know what's happening in a couple months?
My birthday?
No, before your birthday.
Our anniversary?
In between those, I turned the big 50 this year.
Oh my God, you're getting old.
I know. And I don't know whether I want to ignore it completely or throw a really huge party.
Well, you could throw a huge party. That sounds pretty good.
And then go in the bathroom and cry.
50's not that bad.
It's my party and I'll cry if I want to.
Right. That was 11 years ago for me.
Well, yeah.
Almost 12.
I know.
Well, could be worse.
I know. I could be turning 70.
Well, with that said...
You're giving me that look across the table like it's not that far off.
Not really. As you get older, time goes by a lot quicker.
Yeah, we even did a middle on that, I think, about how it really does. As you get older, it does go by quicker.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
Well, let's not think about it.
Okay.
Let's get into tonight's episode. It's an excellent one.
Of course it is.
All right, Beth, take it away.
So, for those of you who have ever wondered what it might be like to spend a night or two in a prison cell, there is a place in Ottawa, Canada, that lets you do just that, without having to commit a crime. The Ottawa Jail hostel has operated since 1972, offering guests the opportunity to sleep in a jail cell, eat communal meals, and be shut in for the night. You can book a shared cell containing anywhere from 4 to 10 beds with fresh linens, electrical outlets, and private lockers. Shared cells are both co-ed or women only. Private cells can accommodate 1 to 2 people with air conditioning and Wi-Fi, complimentary towels, and double beds covered in thick comforters and pristine white linens.
Wow, if you've got to go to jail, this is the place you want to be.
That's the way to go. Other amenities include a fully equipped communal kitchen, a library, a TV room, and a full bathroom on each floor. If the jail cell doors don't bother you, it's an inexpensive and unique place to stay. Because although the cell rooms are painted white and contain an actual bed, what makes the hostel experience unique is that it's actually housed in an infamous former prison, the Carleton County Jail, otherwise known as the Nicholas Street Jail or the Old Ottawa Jail. So, a lot can be said about the Old Ottawa Jail, and we're certainly going to try to get it all into this episode, from an infamous hanging to the alleged hauntings. But before I really get into it, I just want to point out that the jail is commonly known by all 3 names: the Carleton County Jail, the Nicholas Street Jail, and the Old Ottawa Jail. But I'm going to try and refer to it as just the Carleton County Jail so that it's not confusing. So, initially, Ottawa's jail was a single cell in the courthouse basement. which authorities called, quote, wretched and poisonous. Conditions were so bad in the basement jail in 1860 that there were 12 occupants in the single cell, including one man who was labeled insane and 6 women who were there for what we'd consider minor offenses. The new spacious and airy stone prison building was designed by architect Henry Hodge Horsey and built on Nicholas Street. Based on the Auburn plan of prison design, men, women, children, and the elderly were housed separately, and inmates who posed a threat to others were kept out of the general population. And unlike the former basement jail, the new Carleton County Jail had individual cells. The 4-story stone cell block wing sat at the rear of the building, which was connected by a tunnel to the courthouse. According to heritageottawa.com, a stone wall reaching almost 15 feet high enclosed a service yard on the north side of the building. The south side had an additional enclosure, this one with a wall that was almost 20 feet high, which enclosed the exercise yard and the gallows. The administrative block, which faces Nicholas Street, was designed in the Italianate style with 3 symmetrical stories. It basically looks like a stone mansion, and this is where the prison governor lived. It may have been spacious and airy, but it was still a prison, and the individual cells lacked heat, light, ventilation, and plumbing. On February 11, 1869, over 5,000 Ottawa residents flocked to the gallows at the prison to witness the execution of one man, Patrick Whelan. Whelan moved to Canada from Ireland just 4 years earlier and had worked as a tailor in Quebec City. But just to give everyone a little context, at that point in time, Canada was dealing with the Fenian Raids, groups of Irish nationalists who decided to take over Canadian cities and demand that England give up rule of Ireland in order to get their Canadian cities back. The U.S. government knew about the raids but didn't really do anything about them, since they were still miffed at England for supposedly backing the Confederacy during the Civil War. Patrick Whelan joined the volunteer cavalry in order to defend the provinces against the Fenian Brotherhood, but was arrested under suspicion of actually helping them. They didn't have enough to court-martial him, and in response, Whelan moved to Buffalo, New York, and then on to Hamilton, Ontario, and then Montreal. He married Bridget Boyle in 1867, an upper-class woman who was 30 years older than him, and the couple moved to Ottawa, where he went back into tailoring. Then there was Thomas D'Arcy McGee, an Irish-Canadian politician, journalist, and poet. Considered the father of Canadian Confederation, McGee was a staunch supporter in Canada becoming a self-governed confederation within the British Empire. He was also completely and strongly opposed to the Fenian Brotherhood, denouncing them as much as he could. On December 31, 1867, McGee's brother answered a knock at the door of McGee's home. 2 strangers entered the house with a dire warning. At 4 a.m., renegades planned to burn the house to the ground. McGee's brother, thankful for the information, wrote a note to the local police asking for protection, and these 2 men said they would be glad to deliver the note for him. It was delivered 45 minutes after the alleged arson was supposed to have taken place. One of those men was Patrick Whelan. A few months later, in April of 1868, McGee was returning to his boarding house on Sparks Street. It was very early morning, and as McGee smoked a cigar and fumbled for his house keys, the owner of the house, Mary Ann Trotter, opened the front door to let him in. Without warning, a .32 caliber bullet tore through McGee's neck and jaw, knocking his dentures out. He died on the street. Wellen was apprehended in a tavern and searched immediately. His pockets yielded a .32 Smith & Wesson pistol with all 6 rounds still loaded, a box of cartridges, some papers, the Irish-American newspaper from a month earlier, a green silk badge of the Toronto Hibernian Benevolent Society, a membership card for the St. Patrick's Benevolence Society, a photograph of a lady, a ticket from the St. Patrick's Literary Society, and 2 tickets to the Shamrock Quadrille Club inviting Wellen and a lady friend. That was enough to convict him.
My God, how did he fit all that into his pockets?
He must have had a lot of deep pockets.
Or a big satchel.
Yeah, I don't know. But the gun that he had was still fully loaded. It had never been fired. Which, I mean, he could have reloaded it, but
right.
It was circumstantial that they,
I wonder if that guy's dentures are in a museum.
The gun is, but I'll get to that later. By all accounts, Wellen's trial was a spectacle. Wellen was described as wearing, quote, an irreproachable black silk hat, black frock coat, white vest with narrow gold chain, and black pants, and exhibiting a jaunty demeanor. He ate apples through the entire first day of the trial, while keeping his arms crossed and stroking his mustache. He studied the flies walking across the ceiling and laughed when the constable tripped as he maneuvered Wellen out of the defendant's box. The witnesses each shared conflicting stories. Some said he had no connection to the Fenian Brotherhood, while others claimed they were paid off to keep quiet. There were also several moments of confusion when John Downey was called to the stand, and he denied ever having lived in Montreal or knowing Wellen. Finally, it was determined that the man on the stand was actually John O'Donnell, not the John Downey they thought they had called. Despite Wellen's attorney's closing statement lasting 3 hours, Wellen was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death by hanging. Wellen responded, quote, now I am held to be a black assassin and my blood runs cold, but I am innocent. I never took that man's blood, end quote. After his sentence was read, Wellen added, quote, all that sentence, my lord, cannot make me guilty, end quote. He went on to say, quote, I am held to be a murderer. I am here standing on the brink of my grave, and I wish to declare to you and to my God that I am innocent, that I never committed this deed, end quote. As I had mentioned earlier, 5,000 people came to watch Wellen's hanging at the Carleton County Jail on February 11, 1869. He maintained until the very end that he was innocent and that he didn't know who had killed McGee. His last words were, quote, God save Ireland and God save my soul, end quote. He was buried in the prison yard. After his death, the gun he allegedly used to murder McGee was mysteriously lost, only to resurface in 1973 as a family heirloom of the Renwick family. They continued to hold on to it for another 32 years until it was auctioned off and bought by the Canadian Museum of Civilization for $105,000. Although death by hanging at the Carleton County Jail didn't stop after Wellen, public executions did. A year after Welland's hanging in 1870, the adjoining courthouse burned to the ground. All of the records and several historical documents were lost, as well as some significant paintings. But more than that, the county sheriff's office, the chambers of the court, and the building's caretaker's quarters were lost too. A new courthouse was built on the corner of Nicholas and Daly Streets. But back to the jail. As I had mentioned earlier, men, women, and children were imprisoned there for anything from murder to being in debt and unable to pay your bills. Children who were caught stealing were often imprisoned until their families could pay off the debt. Once their sentence was given in the courthouse, they were blindfolded and led through the underground tunnel to a trap door that opened into the prison's basement. They were walked past the hole, or solitary confinement, on purpose, as a warning of what happened to those who didn't behave. And I'll get to what that was like in a second. Then they were processed through the mugshot room and brought to their cell. The tunnel was also allegedly used to remove the bodies of those who passed away in the jail. New immigrants to the city were allegedly quarantined in the jail's basement due to the fear of scarlet fever. The guards, too afraid of potentially contracting it themselves, often left entire families down there for months at a time. According to ghostwalks.com, inmates who didn't behave were punished by only getting one meal a day. Those who continued to challenge the rules of behavior were brought down to the hole, an area in the basement where they were stripped naked, forced to lay face down and spread eagle on the floor, and chained by the wrists and ankles to the floor. Left in complete darkness, they were only released from their chains once a day for 15 minutes so they could eat and use the bucket. It's said that many inmates chose to take their own lives in the secret staircase, a narrow staircase between the jail cells and the warden's quarters, which makes the discovery of the vampire's note all the more creepy. Now, I couldn't find any details on how old this note was or where exactly it was found hidden in the staircase, but according to ghostwalks.com, the note said, quote, "I am a non-veridical vampire who will vanquish you all. One by one, I will ornate your odorous flesh with famished fangs. But who? Are there 94 or 95 steps to the 9th floor? A book on the top shelf will lead you on the right path." End quote. And below the text is a circle with an inverted code that reads capital S 3 lowercase a. There's a lot to speculate about. First, and most importantly, does this note actually exist? I don't have the answer to that, nor do I have any idea what any of it could mean. I did look up non-veridical because I had no idea what that meant. Non-veridical means something that is subjectively perceived to be true. So, others might not see it, but you might if you think it exists. So, whoever wrote the note might be saying that they believe they are a vampire, but no one else sees it. Or that others believe that person to be a vampire, but they don't see it themselves. As far as a 9th floor, the prison only has 4 floors. So they may have been referencing something else in literature and not the prison itself. And lastly, what books were kept on the top shelf in the library? The obvious answer would be a Bible, since it says it would lead the reader down the right path. But it could just as easily have been a copy of Bram Stoker's Dracula or a philosophy book, or even something more mundane like electric wiring for dummies or something. We have no way of knowing, but this alleged note certainly added to the lore of the secret staircase, one of the more haunted hotspots in the former jail. And we'll be right back with more history and the hauntings after this quick break. Hey, did you know? Here are a few proper insults from history that we really think should be brought back.
Rake fire, for the one person who overstays so long that even the embers have died in the fireplace, and you just want them to go home already. Skabberlacher, for the person who waits until all the work is done to nonchalantly wander into the room, look at your sweat-covered brow, and ask, "Do you need any help?" Gobbermouch, for the one person who always knows and shares the latest gossip. And last but not least, Fopdoodle, the one person who thinks they are the bee's knees, when in reality, they bring hardly anything to the table.
So the next time you're searching for the ultimate insult, try throwing out, "You are such a rakefire, skobberlacher, gobbermouch, fopdoodle." Who'da thunk it?
All right, we're back. And I'm going to pick up where Beth left off about the Old Ottawa Jail. According to todayinottawahistory.com, by the 1930s, the prison was showing its age and in bad need of an overhaul. Canada was going through some major prison reform at that time, and P.D. Ross, the chairman of the Royal Commission on Public Welfare, pushed for 47 jails to be replaced by a dozen properly conducted provincial institutions. Carleton County just happened to be one of those 47, and it was cited as being overcrowded with a herd mentality, where little medical attention and little for the prisoners to do was taking its toll. Plus, they were still allowing children to be incarcerated there with the general population. In 1933, the jail performed its second hanging. A 22-year-old man named William Seabrook was put to death for stealing weapons and then shooting a gas station attendant during a robbery. At that point, the gallows hadn't been used in over 60 years, and it took prison employees 2 days to ensure that they were still fully functional. Seabrook's hanging was not viewed by the public, but they did raise a black flag when it was over, to signify that his sentence had been carried out. Meanwhile, Chairman Ross's report on the jail's conditions received public support, the news media calling out for something to be done. The Ottawa Journal referred to the jail as a, quote, medieval dungeon built in the days of the corduroy roads. Corduroy roads, in case you were wondering, were what people called logs laid side by side over swampy areas so that wagons could pass through. The Ottawa grand jury came down on the locals for allowing such a sad state of affairs to continue in their community. However, nothing was done, and the Carleton County Jail continued to function as it was. In 1946, the third and final hanging took place on March 27, 1946 at 12:32 a.m. According to the Historical Society of Ottawa website, Eugene Larman, age 24, had been in and out of trouble for a long time. At 12 years old, he was sent away to school for delinquent boys as punishment for constant truancy. During his 3 years there, no one came to visit him or sent him any letters. By age 15, he had run away and began pickpocketing in Ottawa until he was caught and then sent to a government-run reformatory. After a few months, he was released, but found himself sent back after being caught breaking and entering at 16. At the age of 18, he and some friends stole a taxi and then tied up and robbed 2 men at gunpoint at a service station. He ran from the police, careening the stolen vehicle into an oncoming car and then onto a guardrail. He served a 6-year sentence. 2 months after being granted parole in 1945, Larman and 2 of his buddies smashed the glass windows of the Canadian War Museum and stole 3 Thompson World War II submachine guns, 2 automatic pistols, and 4 World War I revolvers. Police were obviously on the lookout for Larman and his friends, and when one officer approached him, Larman pulled a gun from under his long trench coat and shot Detective Thomas Stoneman in the chest point blank. They were incarcerated in the Carleton County Jail for murder. Larman and his 2 buddies continued to cause trouble, first by attempting to escape, and then savagely beating one of the guards during the attempt. Larman was the last person to be put to death by hanging at the Carleton County Jail. By the late 1940s, the push to close Ottawa's county jail was stronger than ever, and the idea of prison farms had gained great popularity. Government authorities deemed the jail lacking in plumbing, ventilation, recreation facilities, and size. They also objected to there being just 3 showers in the entire building. So in 1948, ground was broken 40 miles south of Ottawa for the Rideau Industrial Farm, and people believed that the jail would close for good. But it didn't, of course, and it continued to operate as a jail until 1972. And that's when it was purchased by Hosteling International and converted into the unique overnight accommodation that it's been for nearly 50 years. In recent years, there seems to have been some issues. For example, Mugshots, the hostel's bar, opened in 2009, but then closed in 2015. But the building was purchased once again in 2022 by St. Lo Hostels, and from their website, it seems as though there are plenty of cells for curious tourists to book for overnight stays. Although based on the reports of ghostly happenings, you may not want to. Or, because you're just like us, you probably would want to. It sounds like a cool place to stay overnight. According to hostelworld.com, guests staying at the jail have reported seeing a man walking down the hallways towards the gallows. Or even worse, woken up in the middle of the night to see a man standing at the end of their bed. The apparition doesn't speak or seem to acknowledge the living. It's as if he's doomed to wander the halls of the jail without communicating why he's still there. People do speculate, though, and believe the apparition is of Patrick Wellen, and his restless spirit is still tied to the jail because of where they buried him, in the prison yard. Many people believe that he's still upset about his burial place, and he will continue to wander until he feels the wrong done to him is righted. The hostel's lounge area is where the women and children's wards once were. Today, the long corridor has an echoey feel to it, and you can get the sense of that by just looking at the pictures online. One side is flanked with windows, and the other is dotted by black painted uprights supporting the arched brick ceiling. Beyond those uprights are the cells. But against the windows are rows of tables and chairs set up for a quick meal or a place to put your laptop. Guests claim to have all kinds of experiences in the lounge, especially involving doors. Imagine yourself sitting in the lounge area of this former prison. You're reading a book or checking your email when you hear a cell door slam not 10 feet away from you. But when you jump up to look, there's no one there. Other guests have reported the sound of knocking in the lounge, as if unseen hands are knocking on the walls. According to npiweb.com, guests have heard disembodied screams and the sounds of children crying. They've also reported the sound of footsteps echoing along the corridor as if someone is approaching, but of course, there's no one there. The gallows are also said to be a hot spot with their own phantom footsteps and disembodied voices. For many years, the Haunted Walk Tours Company offered nighttime ghost tours of the jail, and they had used the death row cells as a starting point. Many of the sites that I looked up online referred to tours people had taken with that company. As of 2023, St. Lo Hostels ended their contract with the tour company, saying that they wanted to convert the death row cells into more overnight rooms in order to accommodate more guests. So you can certainly stay there, but there aren't any official ghost tours that go through anymore, unfortunately. Now, that truly is unfortunate that the ghost tours aren't going through anymore. But with that said, you really don't need to be on one to have an experience there. According to hostelworld.com, assistant manager Jeff Delgado shared a creepy experience that he had. One day, a woman booked the former warden's room. He didn't tell her that that's who the room once belonged to, but the next day, when she still hadn't checked out, he became concerned. They went up to the room and discovered the woman in some sort of a sleep paralysis state. He said, quote, "The front desk agent shook the woman, and she woke up very frightened and hysterical. According to her, there was a small girl that appeared to her in her sleep in the office surroundings and wrapped her arms around her so tight that she would not be able to wake up. The little girl was also supposedly trying to whisper something in her ear, from which the guest could only make out the word help. The woman was able to describe in detail how the warden's office had once looked, even though she had no reference for it, and she was also able to describe the little girl in great detail. In 2019, the Royal Canadian Mint issued a non-circulating coin featuring the haunted jail. On one side of the coin is the traditional Queen Elizabeth bust, but on the other side is a holographic image of a woman standing in front of the jail's entrance. When you tilt the coin, the image of a ghostly figure appears behind her. They designed the ghost to resemble Patrick Whelan. Only 100,000 of those coins were minted, but can usually be purchased online for less than $50, about the price of reserving one of the shared cells for an overnight stay. So, that's a real good deal. I mean, you can't even take your family out to McDonald's for $50.
No, you cannot. And some of the cells, the bigger ones, are only like $30 a night.
That's a really good deal,
I know.
even though it is a hostel.
Right. So, I mean, yeah, it's communal everything, but, if it's only for a night or two, who cares?
I know, and when's the last time you slept in bunk beds?
Never.
Really?
Nope.
Oh, my kids used to have them, and once in a while I'd get up in there in the bunk bed with one of them while we watch TV. They're quite tiny.
I don't think I'd enjoy being that close to the ceiling.
I just have this fear of getting up in the middle of the night and not taking the stairs and falling down on my face.
Well, that's a possibility, yeah. Or, if you're staying there and you could wake up in the middle of the night and you'd be eye to eye with the ghost of Patrick Whelan.
That's okay.
Well, I'd just see his shins or his knees.
Well, that's still better than falling on your face from the bunk bed.
Well, that's true.
Well, that's about it for this episode.
Yeah, everybody. As always, if you would like to know more about the Old Ottawa Jail, also known as the Carleton County Jail, you can always check our sources in our show notes.
Yeah, also if you're curious, check out those coins online. They're pretty cool.
They are. They do a good job.
That they do. Way to go, Canada, our neighbors to the north.
See you soon, everybody.
Join us again next week for an all-new episode of Where Our Minds Wander.
See you then. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to traveling with you again to the places where our minds wander.
If you like what you heard, please take a moment and provide us with a 5-star rating and a comment on your favorite listening platform. It really helps us move up the list and become more visible on the podcast charts so new people can find us.
And thank you all for your continued support.
See you next week for an all-new episode.